Good evening, Frankford Hall. My name is Christopher Mowdy, and I am funky. That means two things. Not only am I a musician that plays funk music by slapper de bass line, and in case you didn't know, funk music is called funk music because it's dance music. And when you dance, you sweat. And when you sweat, you get stanky. And when you get stanky, you get funky. Funk equals stank. Which brings me to my second point. I'm an amazing source for funk nasty stank. In fact, I love the smell of my own farts. Not many other people like the smell of my farts. And to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the smell of other people's farts. It is this difference in perception that I've been fascinated with my whole life that has actually led me towards the scientific field of psychology. Allow me to unpack that. After a failed attempt at being a rock star when I was 17, I moved to Hollywood, California. It didn't work so much. I moved back to Philly to study jazz at a proper music school. Now, an elective that I had to take being music school was a psychology course. In that psychology course, I had an epiphany. It was as though the hand of a god that I didn't believe existed touched me on the forehead and said, "This is the language that will help you answer all those questions you have about farts." Not really, but what it did do is it helped me categorize my thoughts within a framework of individual differences. Individual differences is what psychology studies, and it accounts for those changes in perception, those differences in perception from the same stimuli that I had been fascinated with. So I bounced from music school and I get a degree in psychology. Afterwards, I get a gig that is musician talk. You know what I'm talking about, right? That's musician talk for a job. So I get this job, I get this gig at the Monell Chemical Senses Center in the laboratory of Dr. Pamela Dalton, studying the psychology of olfaction. For those of you that are following the thread of funk, allow me to bring this full circle. As a funk nasty source of stank, who played music that evoked funk nasty stank in others, I was now in a laboratory studying the perception of how we perceive stank. Bravo, universe. Bravo. This job not only was a blessing, it was a bit of a curse. It was a blessing because I was finally working in an experimental psychology lab. It was a curse because, well, I became a bit of an annoyance to my friends with my newfound expertise. Should we be walking past, let's say, a rose bush, I would be the dude that goes, smell that phenylethyl alcohol. To which they would reply, Mowdy, you really can take the romance out of anything, can't you? I didn't so much think that then, I don't think it now, but regardless, you now have a bumper sticker version of how I got into science. So now let's change channels as to why I love science, the topic of tonight's talks. I love science because I see a connection as a musician between the creativity involved in the arts and the creativity involved in science, particularly problem solving, troubleshooting, hypothesis generation, method design. Science is not just the facts. It is a creative endeavor that forces you to cleverly answer questions that help you pull back the curtain of the universe and life to see what's behind it. Eventually, my interest in science led towards science education, science communication, that also dovetailed with other interests of mine. Philosophy, religion. Next thing you know, I'm gravitating towards the intertubes and social platforms that cover all of these topics in essentially an umbrella term called the Great Debate. Is there a God? Are there arguments for it? What are the counter arguments for it? I end up hosting interviews with people I disagree with in the hopes of having arguments that are not disagreeable. One of these interviews is with a deist, not just any deist. A beautiful, hyper-intelligent, philosophically savvy deist by the name of Shanna. This interview sparked a friendship. That friendship organically grew into a long-distance romance. It eventually led to our marriage. Before we met in real life, I had pretty much all the interactional information that anybody has. I knew what Shanna sounded like. I knew what she looked like. I had all of her verbal and nonverbal cues, yet our virtual interactions were somehow sterile. I didn't have a complete picture of Shanna. I couldn't smell her. The power of smell became most obvious during this long-distance romance, where when we would get a chance to see each other, we'd trade t-shirts. We'd take them home and use them as pillowcases. That way, we were surrounded by each other's scent as we sailed into slumber. The power of smell, to this day, is an integral part to our relationship. If I were to smell the back of Shanna's neck, I can tell you the difference between sleepy Shanna and not sleepy Shanna. Further, as weird as this sounds, the smell of her breath takes mine away. Why? Why would it be that I'm so intoxicated by the smell of my wife? I could wax poetic about the scientific theories about these things. I could talk about histocompatibility or putative social signals, and these would make wonderful dinner party conversation topics. I'm not quite sure it would make for a good short story. What I can say is, when I'm in the presence of my wife, I'm surrounded by her essence. And when my mind wanders, it finds that essence, which is more than just auditory or visual stimuli. Now, as somebody who studies psychology, I need to let you know that we look at what biases can shape perception. So allow me to wear my biases on my sleeve. I don't think that the essence of my wife would be revealed to me in the way that it has if I didn't study smell, if I didn't attend to her aroma, if I didn't amplify her fragrance as a factor to our interactions. Allow me to offer a piece of advice. If you are not paying attention to your partner's aroma, you're literally not smelling what they're selling. Now, do I really take the romance out of everything by looking at it through the lens of science? Phenylethyl alcohol. I love Shanna. I love her essence. I love her aroma. And I love science because it equips me with the tools to pay attention to what's important. And it gives me the language to articulate why. Thank you.